Hope's pregnancy was supposed to mark a pause in the long, exhausting rhythm of Los Angeles, a temporary retreat from scrutiny, expectation, and the relentless need to perform resilience in public. The decision to leave for Europe with Liam was framed as something gentle, almost old-fashioned in its intention. Rest, distance, a chance to let new life grow away from the noise that had defined so much of her adulthood. There were no press releases, no grand announcements, just suitcases packed with practical clothes, prenatal vitamins tucked into side pockets, and the quiet agreement that this journey was about preservation rather than escape. Hope believed that stepping away would protect what mattered most. She did not yet understand how dangerous absence could be. The morning of their departure carried a strange calm, the kind that often precedes rupture. Airports are usually loud with urgency, but that day felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to watch. Hope noticed small things, the way Liam kept glancing back at her as if counting her steps, the faint hum beneath the terminal announcements, the weight of her own breath as it adjusted to a changing body. She rested a hand over her stomach instinctively, already aware that this child had become the axis around which everything else would turn. The idea that the world might keep spinning without her for a while felt almost comforting. Then the plane vanished. The news broke not as a confirmation, but as a question, and questions are far more destabilizing than facts. A commercial aircraft en route across the Atlantic had lost contact. Search and rescue operations were being mobilized. Authorities urged patience. In Los Angeles, patience evaporated instantly. Screens flickered to life across offices and living rooms, and the name of the airline became a refrain repeated with mounting dread. When Hope and Liam's flight numbers surfaced among the possibilities, the city seemed to hold its breath. By the time officials confirmed that the aircraft had gone down and that passengers were unaccounted for, the shock had already metastasized into something deeper and more corrosive. Bill felt it before he heard it. Panic, for him, was not a sudden scream, but a tightening, a rapid internal calculus that demanded action before emotion could interfere. The moment the report reached him, something ancient and ferocious stirred. Hope was not just family by association. She was part of a fragile ecosystem of legacy, love, and consequence that he had spent a lifetime trying to control. Liam, his son, was missing. Hope, carrying his grandchild, was missing. The word accident arrived quickly, but Bill did not accept it. Accidents were chaotic. This felt precise. As the hours stretched on, details began to surface, and with each one the story grew less coherent. Passenger manifests released to the press showed discrepancies, names added, others removed, timestamps altered without explanation. Aviation officials attributed the inconsistencies to last-minute changes and data synchronization errors, explanations that sounded reasonable until examined closely. Then there was the airport footage. Cameras that should have captured boarding and gate activity showed gaps, minutes of darkness precisely aligned with the window in which Hope and Liam would have passed through. Technical failures, they said. Coincidences. Too many of them. The call came to Bill that same day, its timing almost theatrical. A distorted voice offered nothing concrete, no ransom demand, no claim of responsibility. It did not need to. The message was in the targeting itself. Bill was meant to know that he was being watched, that his reaction was part of the design. The caller wanted him anxious, distracted, burning resources in every direction at once. Fear, when applied to someone like Bill, was a lever, and someone was pulling it with intention. Los Angeles responded the way it always does to uncertainty, with spectacle layered over grief. News anchors spoke in measured tones while speculation bloomed unchecked. Hope's disappearance immediately became more than a human tragedy. It became a narrative vacuum everyone wanted to fill. Social media split into camps, those clinging to optimism, those already eulogizing, and those quietly calculating what Hope's absence meant in practical terms. Her image, her brand, her carefully curated identity as a symbol of morality and renewal suddenly floated untethered, available for interpretation and control. Brooke felt the loss as both mother and architect. Hope had always represented something aspirational to her, a continuation of belief, a proof that goodness could survive in a world that rewarded compromise. The idea that hope might be gone, or worse, suspended in some liminal space between life and death, tore at Brooke's sense of order. Yet, even as she grieved, Brooke understood the implications. Silence invites substitution. Absence invites appropriation. If Hope could not speak for herself, someone else would inevitably do it for her. Katie saw the situation through a sharper, more defensive lens. She recognized the patterns immediately, tragedy becoming leverage, concern turning into control. Hope's pregnancy complicated everything. The unborn child was not just a life, it was a symbol, a future asset wrapped in vulnerability. Whoever managed Hope's image now would shape the narrative around the child, its legitimacy, its legacy, its meaning. Katie knew that in the wrong hands, grief could be weaponized, morality monetized. The Logan sisters' long-standing tensions did not dissolve in the face of crisis, they transformed. Brooke leaned toward preservation through continuity, wanting to maintain Hope's public presence as faithfully as possible to keep her voice alive through memory and intention. Katie feared that such continuity could slide into exploitation, that speaking for Hope could easily become speaking over her. Their arguments were quiet but intense, rooted in different interpretations of responsibility. Both believed they were protecting Hope. Neither fully trusted the other to do it without overreach. While the Logan conflict simmered, Bill moved with brutal efficiency. He activated every channel available to him: private investigators, intelligence consultants, international contacts whose names never appeared on paper. Spencer power was not subtle, but it was effective, and Bill wielded it without hesitation. Flights were traced. Data streams were subpoenaed or acquired through less formal means. Patterns emerged that did not align with the randomness of a mechanical failure. The more Bill uncovered, the clearer it became that the crash was not merely a disaster, but a convergence point, a place where multiple manipulations intersected. What disturbed him most was the sophistication. This was not the work of a lone actor seeking attention or profit. The alterations to flight data, the precise camera outages, the psychological pressure applied through the anonymous call, all of it suggested coordination by someone who understood systems deeply. Someone who knew how to exploit bureaucracy, technology, and human behavior simultaneously. Bill recognized the style. He had seen it before in corporate warfare, in hostile takeovers that never announced themselves until the outcome was inevitable. This was that kind of playbook applied to human lives. As days passed without confirmation of survivors, public hope oscillated between fervent belief and quiet resignation. Memorials appeared and disappeared, candles lit and relit as if repetition might alter reality. Brooke oscillated with them, clinging to reports of possible debris fields that suggested survivability, rejecting any implication that closure was approaching. Katie focused on logistics, on legalities that felt premature but necessary. Who had authority over Hope's brand? Who could approve statements, protect trademarks, manage intellectual property tied to her name? These were not questions either sister wanted to answer, but the world was already asking them. The unborn child became the silent center of every discussion. Without Hope present to define boundaries, speculation flourished. Would the child be raised within the Logan orbit, shielded from the chaos that had consumed its parents? Or would others assert claims emotional, legal, symbolic over a future that no one could yet see? The idea that a life not yet born could become a battleground sickened both Brooke and Katie, even as they found themselves maneuvering to prevent exactly that outcome. In private moments, Brooke wondered whether Hope would forgive her for stepping into the void, for making decisions in her name. Katie wondered whether restraint might be mistaken for weakness, allowing more aggressive forces to seize control. Their shared grief did not unify them, it sharpened their differences, forcing them to confront how much of their identities had been shaped by protecting one another and how fragile that protection became when the stakes escalated beyond anything they had known. Bill's investigation finally hit a wall that felt less like an obstacle and more like a warning. Certain data points vanished when pursued too aggressively. Contacts who had been cooperative grew silent. Jurisdictional complications multiplied, each one plausible on its own, overwhelming in aggregate. Someone was countering his moves in real time, adjusting the board as he advanced. The realization chilled him. This was not a chase, it was a game, and he had been invited whether he liked it or not. The question that haunted him was not who would benefit financially from Hope and Liam's disappearance, but who would benefit narratively, who needed them gone not permanently, perhaps, but long enough to reshape alliances, redistribute power, and test limits. The manipulation was not about erasing individuals. It was about controlling what their absence would do to everyone else. Panic, distraction, infighting. Bill recognized the trap even as he struggled to avoid it. As the Logan sisters' conflict intensified, external pressures mounted. Advisors, brand managers, and distant relatives offered opinions cloaked as concern. Each suggestion carried an implicit claim to authority. Brooke felt herself being pushed toward decisions that would preserve Hope's image at all costs, even if it meant freezing her in an idealized state that left no room for uncertainty or eventual return. Katie pushed back, insisting that any action taken now must leave space for Hope's voice to reclaim itself if she survived. Their arguments were no longer about strategy, they were about faith. The absence of Hope and Liam began to feel engineered not just to remove them, but to expose fault lines in everyone connected to them. Bill saw it. Brooke and Katie lived it. Even those on the periphery sensed it, the way conversations drifted toward power and control rather than loss. Tragedy had become a mirror, reflecting the structures people relied on when certainty vanished. And somewhere beyond the reach of news cameras and boardrooms, the truth remained suspended whether Hope and Liam were alive, whether the crash was a cover or a catastrophe, whether the unborn child's fate was being decided by forces far removed from love or family. The only certainty was that nothing would return to what it had been. The disappearance had already done its work, turning absence into influence, fear into momentum. In the end, the most unsettling realization settled quietly over Los Angeles that the plane crash was not just an event to be mourned or solved, but a catalyst designed to force everyone to reveal who they were when the future was no longer guaranteed. Bill would chase the truth with everything he had, even if it meant walking deeper into the trap laid for him. Brooke and Katie would continue to fight over how to protect a daughter who could not defend herself. And the world would watch, hungry for answers, unaware that the real story was not only about where Hope and Liam had gone, but about what their absence was already destroying and who was orchestrating the collapse from behind the scenes. When Sheila Carter reaches out to Lee Finnegan, she does so with the careful precision of someone who understands that true traps are never announced as such. On the surface, the request appears almost mundane in need for assistance, a professional concern cloaked in urgency and vulnerability. Sheila has perfected this tone over decades, the voice that sounds just fractured enough to invite sympathy, just controlled enough to avoid suspicion. To anyone else, the call might feel like an inconvenience. To Lee, it feels like a summons she cannot ignore, because buried beneath the words is a recognition of shared history, of lines already crossed and truths already bent. Lee has spent much of her life believing that morality, once compromised, could still be contained. She tells herself that one misstep does not define a person, that circumstances matter, that intentions soften consequences. Yet, even as she answers Sheila's call, she senses the danger not in what is being asked, but in who is asking. Sheila does not request help unless help can be leveraged. She does not seek proximity unless proximity can be transformed into obligation. And Lee, despite her discipline and intellect, understands something chilling. Sheila remembers everything. Not just actions, but hesitation. Not just decisions, but the fear that preceded them. Their meeting is deliberately unremarkable. No raised voices, no dramatic revelations. Sheila frames her situation as precarious but manageable, a problem that requires discretion rather than heroics. She speaks of threats that feel abstract, of pressures that suggest vulnerability without specifying weakness. Lee listens, initially with professional detachment, offering measured responses that keep her just outside the circle of implication. Yet Sheila is patient. She allows silence to do the work, letting Lee fill the gaps with her own assumptions. The genius of the moment lies in what is not said. Sheila does not accuse Lee of anything. She simply reminds her, gently, of the fragility of reputations built on selective truth. Lee's internal conflict surfaces quietly, like a tremor beneath calm water. She has crossed ethical boundaries before, justified by necessity, by the belief that harm avoided outweighed harm committed. Each time, she promised herself it was the last. Each time, she survived the consequences, reinforcing the illusion that survival equated to absolution. Sheila understands this pattern intimately. She knows that the easiest way to bind someone is not to force them into a crime, but to invite them into a continuation. One more step, she suggests without saying it aloud, just enough to make turning back impossible. From that moment, the dynamic shifts. Lee is no longer simply a potential ally, she is a liability Sheila intends to manage. The invitation becomes an initiation, subtle but irreversible. Sheila begins to construct a narrative, not a lie, exactly, but a version of events that can withstand scrutiny if presented with confidence. This new truth does not require resurrection, miracles, or dramatic reversals. It requires only one thing, a secret large enough to reframe everything people think they know. A secret that, once revealed, would not just damage reputations, but collapse relationships built on assumed innocence. Sheila's focus sharpens toward Finn Finnegan and Steffy Forrester, not because she needs them destroyed outright, but because they represent something Sheila has never been allowed to possess: moral authority without question. Finn's sense of righteousness, his belief in clean lines between right and wrong, irritates her more than open hostility ever could. Steffy's confidence in her own judgment, her certainty that she can identify threats and eliminate them, feels like an insult to Sheila's lived reality. To Sheila, they are not enemies to be defeated, they are myths to be dismantled. The brilliance of Sheila's plan lies in its restraint. She does not need Finn or Steffy to fall publicly, at least not yet. She needs them to doubt themselves. She needs the ground beneath their certainty to soften, to become unstable enough that every decision feels compromised. The secret she is building is designed to do exactly that. It will not accuse them directly. It will implicate them indirectly, forcing them to confront the possibility that their moral clarity was purchased at a cost they refused to examine. Lee becomes the keystone of this architecture. Her involvement does not have to be overt. It only needs to be undeniable. Sheila guides her carefully, presenting information in fragments, asking questions that seem theoretical but carry practical implications. Each answer Lee gives becomes another thread woven into the narrative Sheila is assembling. The danger is not that Lee is being coerced. It is that she is participating willingly, believing she can still control the outcome. Sheila allows this illusion to persist, knowing that control is the first thing it will devour. As the version of truth takes shape, it becomes clear that Sheila's objective is not revenge in the traditional sense. Revenge implies closure, and Sheila has never been interested in endings. She wants continuation, an ongoing state of tension where no one feels fully safe, fully innocent. The secret she cultivates is meant to linger, to hover over conversations and decisions like a shadow that never quite resolves. It is designed to make Finn question whether his hands are truly clean, to make Steffy wonder if her vigilance blinded her to collateral damage, to make others reassess their own passivity. Lee's internal struggle intensifies as she recognizes the scale of what is being constructed. This is no longer about a single ethical lapse or a contained deception. This is about rewriting the moral landscape in which everyone operates. Lee tells herself she can still pull away, still refuse to take the final step. But Sheila has anticipated this resistance. She does not threaten Lee outright. She simply outlines the consequences of exposure with clinical calm, framing them as inevitabilities rather than punishments. The message is clear: withdrawal now would not restore Lee's integrity. It would only isolate her as the sole bearer of guilt. The psychological bind tightens. Lee begins to see how easily the narrative Sheila proposes could be believed, how plausibly it aligns with existing tensions and unspoken doubts. That realization terrifies her more than Sheila ever could. It means that truth, as Lee once understood it, has become negotiable. It means that morality can be recontextualized by perspective, not erased but reshaped. And in that reshaping, Lee's own actions take on new meanings she cannot fully control. Sheila watches this transformation with quiet satisfaction. She does not rush. She understands that the most durable lies are built slowly, anchored in fragments of reality. She allows Lee to struggle, to rationalize, to believe she is still choosing. Every moment of hesitation deepens the complicity because it confirms that Lee sees the trap and steps forward anyway. By the time Lee realizes that there is no clean exit, the exit has already vanished. The ripple effects begin subtly. Finn senses a shift in Lee's behavior, a guardedness that feels unfamiliar. Steffi notices inconsistencies in conversations, moments where answers feel rehearsed rather than instinctive. Neither can articulate the unease, but both feel it. This is exactly what Sheila intends. Suspicion, once seated, does not require evidence to grow. It requires only time and silence. The secret itself remains unnamed, its contours visible only in implication. That ambiguity is its strength. It allows Sheila to adapt, to adjust the narrative depending on resistance. She can reveal just enough to destabilize, withholding the rest as leverage. The power lies not in disclosure, but in the constant threat of it. Finn and Steffi, who have always confronted danger head-on, find themselves facing something far more insidious: uncertainty about their own foundations. As days turn into weeks, the new truth begins to influence decisions without ever being spoken aloud. Conversations change tone. Trust becomes conditional. Lee, trapped between fear and responsibility, becomes increasingly isolated, her silence misread as composure. Sheila, meanwhile, remains patient, almost serene. She has achieved what she set out to do. She has bound Lee to her not through force, but through shared risk, and she has created a weapon that does not need to be fired to be effective. In the end, Sheila's strategy reveals something deeply unsettling about the world she inhabits. Power does not always come from exposure or violence. Sometimes it comes from understanding how far people will go to protect the image they have of themselves. By inviting Lee to take one step too far, Sheila ensures that everyone connected to Lee is pulled into the gravitational field of that choice. Innocence becomes a matter of debate. Guilt becomes a matter of perspective. Whether the secret will ever be fully revealed remains uncertain. What is certain is that it already exists, shaping behavior, distorting judgment, eroding trust. Sheila does not need redemption, nor does she seek vindication. Her victory lies in proving that no one is untouched by compromise, that the line between right and wrong is thinner than anyone wants to admit. And as Finn and Steffi move forward, sensing but not yet seeing the trap closing around them, Sheila waits, knowing that the most devastating truths are not those that explode, but those that suffocate slowly, leaving everyone gasping for clarity that may never come.